Okay, so I did an at task through the different transitions that you went through. So this was the first part on the carpet, and then the first transition back to the desk, and then the next transition to the carpet, where you kind of went over the spelling expectations, and then their spelling test time. So on the carpet, so how this works is I'm really just going through each student and marking them as either passive or active in their attention, or if they're distracted or talking. And so I got through each kiddo about 4 times on the carpet. So their passive and active attention was about 65%, and then their distracted and talking was 34%. So what do you think? What does that make you think about?
I think that makes me think about just more, because that's something that we've kind of struggled with, like a lot of talking, because I have a chatty bunch again this year. So just trying to go over, that's why during the spelling test, like trying to reiterate that it's supposed to be quiet. We're supposed to be on a 0 right now. And then also we've been practicing in like other areas like literacy, like what should we be doing when I'm talking? What should we be doing when your neighbor is talking or sharing an answer? So I think we just need to keep practicing that, because honestly, some of them have gotten better, and then some of them still struggle. Like I'm sure you've seen Joseph, who just does not get it.
What have you noticed any trends in his behavior as far as like how he responds when it's hard? That's kind of what I noticed, was his reactions are different when it's challenging for him.
And he's been doing a lot better, but it's just when he doesn't know how to do something, he honestly gets more upset at himself, because sometimes the task is like so beyond what he knows that I'll try to like simplify it for him kind of, and let him finish that simplified piece, but then he gets mad at himself that he can't do the whole entire task. So he'll, even if he's done the task that I've given him, he'll still be upset that he couldn't complete the entire task, even though I'm giving him less things to focus on.
Yeah, sounds like he's got some high expectations for himself.
So like that's a good thing, because before, when he first came in here, he didn't want to do anything, and now he actually wants to work with us and like complete his task fully and do what the other kids are doing and make sure he's trying to do his job, even though he does still get distracted.
What do you think's helped him kind of change that attitude?
I think a lot of positive reinforcement, like when he is doing what he's supposed to be doing, like I always make sure to point it out, like even if it's just sitting on the carpet and like looking at the board, I always make sure to say, oh, I love how Joseph's sitting and looking at the board. Or if he goes to his desk right away and gets started on his work right away, like making sure that he knows that I saw him do that. Because I think that really in the first couple weeks like helped him get used to like, okay, I want to get my task done, because when I do this, like she says good job or things like that. So I think that's really motivating him. And then also when he sits with Jamar and two other girls, but I think when he sees, I think he really likes Jamar too. So when he sees like, oh, Jamar's doing this and doing his work, like I want to do like what Jamar's doing. So I think also who he sits by is helping him too.
Nice.
Which is nice.
Yeah. I feel like the data was kind of similar all the way around. Like at the tables, it was like 40, it was like split, like 49% and 51%. And then at the carpet again, it was same, like 44, 55. And then during the actual spelling test, that was better. They were very engaged in that spelling test. I noticed 61-38. So,
and sometimes I think with spelling tests too, a lot of things we've been working on is that they get very flustered when they have to do things on their own. And like that was their second time, so I'm glad that it was better that time, because the first time like they were so flustered that like they didn't want to spell it on their own, even though we talked about trying our best. Or some of them did great, and then I just had some that were just not used to trying to spell that word on their own, like kind of how Joseph acted on that day. Like a couple more of them were acting that way during the first time we did a practice spelling test. Then that second time we did it, I'm glad that that was better.
Awesome.
because they definitely were freaking out when they had to finally like pound and tap on their own and tried to spell it out. So I'm glad that the second round was better.
Yeah, I noticed too that you tell me about like how you were talking to Danye through it. Like Danye, I noticed he was getting a little frustrated. Tell me about that.
He's kind of like needs a lot of positive reinforcement too, but then also needs to be put in his place sometimes because he gets very pouty. And then if he wants you to give in to his poutiness, but a lot of times you have to give him some tough love. Like I don't think really that day I don't think I had to be too harsh on him, but it was more positive of like just try your best, like it's okay if you don't get it right, because he gets very hard on himself and is also craves a lot of attention. So like whenever he doesn't know, he automatically wants like, adult, please come help me, adult.
Got it.
No matter who it is, like if Heather's in here, he'll go to Heather if I'm not helping him. So it's just again having him practice like it's okay if you don't know, just try your best to do it on your own, because he wants adult attention at the end of the day. All the time.
Okay, so if we just think about the routine as a whole, what are some of the key points you like of that routine? What do you feel like are like the big important moments of your foundational routine?
I think the most important thing, and we talk about it all the time, is like practicing tapping out sounds, because it's something we do every day all week long. So I want to keep practicing that and getting them in that routine, because it honestly helps them with everything that we do, whether it's on our whiteboard or reading a word or during our spelling test. So I think that's the most important thing, like segmenting words and chopping up syllables is something that we've been practicing a lot. So during the spelling test, like even before, like we talked about kind of like, okay, like all week long we've been practicing pounding and tapping, like make sure you try and use that today on your spelling test too. So that way they know like, okay, when we're during the week, like we're practicing this. So Friday, when it comes time to do it on our own, we know how to do it. So I think that's something that we try to hammer really hard in foundational skills.
Do you notice any trends with that in your spelling test? Do you notice that like more kids doing it or less, or what are you noticing there?
I think I see more kids doing it. I mean, I even can hear them doing it sometimes, like hearing them tap out the sounds that they hear, or I hear them saying the sounds that they hear and writing at the same time, which is another thing that I think is great to hear. So even sometimes when I say you need to be like on a 0, like obviously that sometimes excludes like them writing and saying the sounds. So I'm glad that they kind of are understanding that too. But a lot of them are doing that on their own, even when I send them to do independent reading. Like they're using that to help them read sometimes, which is great, because I didn't tell them to do that. So
that's cool.
So I'm glad that they are using it.
How do you feel like your foundation routine overall is going?
It's going way better. We were really slow, obviously, the first week of school, but like they're getting used to picking up the speed and like foundational skills. Like we're getting through everything we need to get through, and then they're also using everything that we're talking about to help them read. Like this week we're doing open and closed syllables, and today they were reading their book, like their decodable book, and they're like, oh, there's there's a word with an open syllable. Oh, this one's closed. Even though I didn't ask them to look for open and closed syllable words, they were still pointing them out and coming up to me and showing them. Or they would even go and say, oh, Miss G, that's a red word, or that's one of our heart words that we did. So what we're doing, I can tell that a lot of them are making connections, which is great to see. Because sometimes I feel like I'm up there teaching and I'm like, they're going to forget this in 2 minutes. But then today they were like coming up and telling me that, and I was like, oh, thank goodness, like they're actually remembering.
What do you think is lending to that? What do you think you're doing during those routines that's really helping them like keep that in their brains?
I try to keep the routine very the same. Like I know sometimes it gets boring to be repetitive every single day, but honestly it's helping to be repetitive every single day, because then they know what's expected of them, and then it's kind of helping them like, okay, this is how I'm supposed to do this every day. And eventually we'll move on to new things, but I think the repetition's really helping them, because again, I'm trying to get them to the point where they can do things on their own.
Yeah.
Because right now they still need a lot of support, but better than in the beginning of the year, but they still need a lot of support. So just a lot of repetition in our routines and not changing too much right now is what I'm sticking to, because the more they get used to it, the more they feel like confident enough to do it on their own. Because even now with like our decodable books, like we've been hammering those every day, even if it's the same one every single day. It's like, okay, at this time we're gonna get out our decodable books and we're gonna pick a spot and read our book. And like every day they get better at reading it because they're practicing it every single time.
Yeah.
So I think just a lot of repetition with it.
I noticed you talked about transitions, and I was kind of going back through, and I recorded some transition times. And like between the carpet and the table was about 2 minutes. Between the table back to the carpet was a little less than 2, and then from the carpet to the spelling test was 4. But I know you were passing out like the book, the things and stuff. So what? But you said it's getting better. So what do you think has helped those transitions get better?
I think counting down. That's something I learned last year because my kids were very slow last year in 2nd grade, and then I observed. I think it was Casey. I think I observed, and he would use that a lot of times too. So then I started using it, and it really helped like quicken my transition. So this year I like started it right away.
Nice.
So they knew like, okay, you better get your butt to the carpet by the time she gets to 0, even though nothing's really gonna happen
right
when they get to 0, but automatically they think something's gonna happen if they're not there yet, or they want to get there because they don't want to be last. So I think that's helped it become faster than like right away. And then as we've just done stuff repetitively through the year, it's just gotten quicker because like again, the first week, even though I was counting down, they were still slower than they are now. But again, the counting down and just repetition of it all is helping them be a little bit quicker.
Cool. It sounds like you're doing a lot of developing of the routine. What are some parts that you were hoping to maybe develop further as the year goes on?
I think again, getting back to that like independent piece and giving them that confidence that like it's okay if I don't know something, like I'm still going to try my best to do it, because a lot of them still struggle with that, like when they get stuck they don't know what to do and they panic. And so even now we talk about like with our decodable books, like if you get to a word that you don't know and you've sounded it out, it's okay, skip it and go to one you do know. So just kind of like getting them comfortable with struggling and like not panicking and asking for help right away is something that we talk about a lot, and that sometimes it's hard because I have to practice like not going to help them right away, like kind of forcing them to struggle. So I think I'm working on like developing their confidence a little bit and getting them just more comfortable with not knowing, because they don't like to not know, which is hard for little kids because they want to know what they need to be doing or what they want to know everything.
Yes, totally.
So it's really hard to just let them struggle, and for them it's hard to struggle. So just getting them comfortable, because I don't know what it is, like little kids just think something's going to happen to them if they don't know, and I always tell them like no one's going to come in here and scream at you if you don't know it.
Isn't that interesting? I wonder where that comes from too.
And I'm like, I'm not going to scream at you if you don't know it, but I do get disappointed if you sit there and you cry and you don't try at all. So like we talk about that a lot, especially right before I give them anything to do on their own. Because a lot of things we do together so far, it's just little parts of the day where I have them do tasks on their own. So we talk about it a lot before almost every activity they need to do on their own. So that's something they're working on.
Do you see that like fear of productive struggle come up in other routines throughout the day?
Yeah, it comes up in math sometimes. Especially what's funny to me is a lot of times when we do things together, like all of them will be raising their hand to like answer and they're getting it right, and then I go send them to do it on their own and it's like, oh, I don't know what to do, and I'm like, we just did this all on the carpet and you were all raising your hand to share it, and now I give it to you to do on your own, and it's like it all disappears from their brain. So it comes up in math a lot too. Literacy, it's fine, but with writing, that's a big one. And I mean, we've talked about it a lot with writing sentences and like the fear of spelling a word wrong is
Mhm.
like the most thing that drives me crazy, because I'm like, no one is gonna come in here
Mhm.
and like rip your paper out of your hand and yell at you, because
Yeah.
like writing a sentence on their own is so hard for them because they want to spell every word right. And I always tell them, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to help you. Like,
Yeah.
I just want you to try and sound out the letters that you do know. If you only know one letter in the word, write one letter in the
Yeah.
word.
I wonder what it would look like to like reward a mistake. You know, like when they're working and you see
Well, and
someone
I
try
make
and mess
sure
up.
that I do that.
Yeah.
Like, if I have a student that does try their best and they still spelt the word wrong, I literally out loud say,
Awesome.
"Oh my gosh, I love how Mercy like tried his best to spell his sentence. He still spelled the word wrong, but he tried his best.
Mhm.
I love that." So I like try to say it out loud
Mhm.
so that they can all hear like, "Oh, Mercy spelled words wrong, but hey, Miss G's still happy because he tried his best to tell her what he thought the answer was."
Yeah.
So I try to make sure that I do that, but like that's where it comes up like probably even more than anything else is in literacy and writing, when they have to write on their own,
Interesting.
because they are just like scared to not spell the word right. And a lot of them will start, like Danye and Joseph, my two with very big emotions, like they start to cry and start to pout and when they can't spell the word on their own. And like Joseph, I told him, I'm like, if you only know the first letter of the word, just put down the first letter.
Yeah.
But he doesn't want to do that because he wants to finish the whole word. So it's again trying to get him used to like, it's okay if you only know one letter. And I'm glad that he has high expectations of himself. Like, that's a good thing. But again, it's like a whole meltdown from those two if they don't, if I don't help them spell the word. So it's again hard for me to not help them spell the word, but I know it's going to help them in the future if I just let them struggle and not give in to their pouting. But some of them are getting better. Good. But it's just, some of them have way bigger emotions than others, and I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. But
do you think there's any like low stakes way they could practice failure?
We did today. We started doing sentences with like our heart words, and I had them come up with like any sentence they wanted using the heart word, and they wrote it on their whiteboard, and it was fine, and they tried their best, and it was great. So I'm hoping that if we keep doing that, because today was the first day I did that, because I wanted to see, like, I wonder like what they would write if I just let them write any sentence they want just using the heart word.
Yeah.
And like Joseph wrote a sentence, didn't make any sense when you wrote it, but I was like, oh, I love that sentence, Joseph. Like, I'm so happy that you wrote down as best as you can like what you wanted to say, and he had the heart word in it because he knew how to spell that. And I was like, that's awesome. And Danye wrote his own sentence with the heart word in it, and he honestly spelled a lot of his words right.
Awesome.
So I don't know where the panic comes from, but like they didn't even think for a second like, oh, how am I going to spell this word? They just did it. So I'm hoping that if we do that every day and just practice like writing any sentence we want with a word, that will help.
How you can build off of that to paper and to you know, a more structured writing.
Because I noticed that today, and I was like, they didn't panic at all today.
That's
so maybe we'll try that.
That is a cool thing to notice.
Yeah, because they're usually the ones that will. I know Danye did ask me how to spell one word, but I just sent him back and said, just try your best to spell it. It's okay. And he ended up spelling it right. So I'm like,
that's so cool.
You don't need as much help as you think that you need. But he's, again, just craves adult attention. Sure. So a lot of times it's not that he needs help. He wants someone to sit right next to him.
Right. So the last thing I did was I just kind of went through and watched the lesson again, and I just put down different, like, we call them like data points of just different things you did and how it related to the standards. So I looked at the first 6 standards. So those are, you know, like making sure that you're trying different techniques to reach all your students, and the classroom management piece, and planning for all your students, and different things like that. And I saw multiple things for every single standard. So it was great to see. I saw a lot of like classroom management stuff, a lot of things focusing on transition, explicit instruction, routines that I could tell that you've done a bunch of times and prepared for, and like word choices that I could tell were very thoughtful. So I saw evidence of all 6 standards in that. So Thank you
Yay.
so much for letting me spend
Yay.
time in your classroom. It was definitely fun to watch. I'm gonna have to come back now because I want to see them like how they're doing now. It's been a couple of weeks and how they improve for sure.
They're really doing great. I mean, I'm really proud of them with like the decodable book because that was like a big thing.
I'm sure.
Because some of them have never like read really a book like that before. I mean, I'm sure they've done some in kindergarten, but not anything as full as that.
Yep.
And like today, it was like crazy to see because it was like one of those moments where I was like, oh my god, some of them are like actually reading this.
Yes.
Because some of them, like the first week, they couldn't even attempt. They didn't even try. Like they were just like, I don't know what it says, and I'm like, well, just practice sounding it out. And they didn't want to do it. And like this week, it was like no problem. They all tried their best.
That's awesome.
And then they were actually reading the words, and I was like, oh my god, they're learning something.
It's working.
Sometimes I feel like none of them are listening to me, but then they go and do it, and I'm like, okay, they are. They're hearing me.
I mean, I think that speaks to your patience and just your like dedication to seeing them through it. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely are. They're getting better.
Good.
A lot of them have some interesting personalities.
Oh, of course they do.
Like Liz, I don't know if you saw her, but she used to cry every day before she